Besnowed by Bauer. Chapter 4. Season's Greetings. Bless ye and thee, I can't hardly believe mine own eyes. They told me we should be expecting guests, but who am I to doubt such unreliable visitors, coming home to Besnowed this late in the season? The only uniform needed at the station was coats and furs, the layers of fabric shielding skin and bones as they added a new layer of difficulty to the work of loading and unloading cargo. They were their own caricatures of strength and bravery as we entered the wilderness that is a frontier village. We were, of course, greeted by the most giant and burliest of them all. Don't recognize your own flesh and blood? You always were a right bastard. Uncle Mbali? What are you doing here? Dad's brother was a bit rough around the edges. He meant well, even if his words struggled to express it. He lived off and on with us growing up, one of those from the town who struggled to find a place where they belong. Uncle Mbali always seemed to find a way to get back on his feet, though, and the community supported him in his new endeavors. I've been working at the station as of late. There's a bet going around about whether or not you'd make it home this year. Rumors of more quarantines or no longer having the taste for our flavor of snow. I don't blame the others for doubting city folk, but I always trust the word of a fellow Kumri. Living behind the walls of Aranum, it's sometimes hard to know what it feels like on the other side. We were healthy and safe, but isolated in such a different way than those in Besnowed. It wasn't nature guarding the town, it was a government controlling the people. The 5 years went by faster than you'd think. Verenum takes good care of its citizens. We were still able to work, and Ren and Zori had no issues continuing their studies or going to school. Ah, get over yourself. Tainted by the city. You sound like your old man bragging with no invitation. Everyone's waiting for you inside, and we don't want these kids to freeze themselves alive. Lovely Lumi would never forgive you for being such a fool. Well, no more of a fool than you already are. Oh, stop it, Mbali. Lumi and her sly smile only affirmed her approval of the jest. I was fine with it all, the teasing and the sarcasm. Maybe that's where Ren learned some of these tricks. Leaning into the wit and tricking his sister into believing all manner of the unbelievable. I know my sisters did that to each other, and me as well. All siblings do. Being back in Besnowed Station brought back more memories from a lifetime ago now. That time I first left. The first time I had to say goodbye. My little sister Nolly's voice is always the first in my clearest memories. Make sure you write to me and let me know what it's like in Verenum City. I will. My voice was lost as I tried to hide a deeper sadness. I always thought I would be gone with no hesitation, but in the moment it was harder. Much harder. These were the people I loved the most. The people who loved me the most. And we were saying goodbye. None of us really knew for how long, but the distance between us meant it might as well have been forever. Sweffen. Mom was already crying as I looked up from staring at my ticket. Find a way to send us a message as soon as you arrive. Or we'll be angry. Aldor, cut it out. Don't stress him out. I'm just making sure he's okay. I will, Mom, and I know, Dad. I gave Mom a deep hug, holding her tight before moving to Dad. We did that awkward thing where neither of us knew where to put our hands. It can be hard to show affection between father and son, but when it matters most, I like to think we both understand. Sweffen? My oldest sister Makodi was next in line. Stern as always, hiding her sorrow in plans within plans. You should be arriving in the evening, and there's a hotel near the station that will be good for you to rest for the night. Okay. I used to struggle so much with showing proper appreciation for all the work she put into making sure her brother could find success. I guess I still do, but it was remarkably noticeable back then. Don't get lost, idiot. Shut up, Brian. Everyone let out a little laugh at the quick summary of me and my second sister's relationship. We all shared another smile before one last round of hugs, regretting the final goodbye. After another forever and a second, I walked past the turnstile. One last look at my loving family before opening the thick door to the harsh realities waiting on the snow-covered platform outside. Where's your head at, boy? Uncle Mbali smacked me on the back as he shoved me into the station doors. Be a man and open the door like a proper host does for his guests. Uncle Mbali, that's not how you treat people. Zori was shocked at the forceful nature of the polite gesture. She was never really exposed to the roughness of the wilderness. People in Verenum kept a respectful distance from each other. Comfort in the space between strangers. In Besnowed, those closest to you wouldn't hide the relationship. There were no conditions to the agreement, and the loyalty was absolute. That's not how city folk treat people, Zori. Out here, you need to make sure there's enough meat on your bones to survive the cold. Uncle Umbali softened his laughter and helped me find my feet as we all stepped inside. He didn't mean to bully and had no ill intention in his forceful nature. It was an honest expression of support, even if it seemed well past an acceptable line for Zori, and probably Lumi too. Umbali, just tone it down a little, okay? I don't want Zori to talk about the barbarians from Besnowed with her friends, and I don't think you would either. Lumi, my dear, I don't give a shit one way or the other. Ren moved to hold Zori's hand as her eyes widened at hearing what she knew as inappropriate language. She was being welcomed to her family in a way that Ren knew was normal, but was a bit overwhelming for his younger sister. These would be her first real memories of the village. I'm not sure we really understood that, but a part of me was glad it started with bombast and contrast. Having those strong moments in her mind would mean Besnowed would stay in her heart as she grew up. That's better than a fleeting vision that passes as just another family trip. The thick wooden doors and that smell, the unmistakable aroma of home, cured meats and seasonal sweets, fresh from the faraway bays and rows upon rows of baked goods, the large stone archway and those old signs written in the older script meant to welcome visitors to the village, the station itself in the same masonry style as the other buildings of the central square, the only material that was easy to source in the earliest days of Besnowed's existence. The warmth inside the station was inviting in that way. The kitchen and the fireplace on opposite ends of the room, the oven was even built in the traditional style, a furnace dug into the ground with a system of tunnels beneath the floors, fresh bread and any brewing stews not only adding to the flavors of the room, they heated it as well. Looking out the front doors, you could see the central square and all the market tents. They formed circles around the first tree and its ornate icicles. St. Vincent's spider Bakeshi sitting at the top and sparkling in the dim sunlight. With the doors to the station opened, we were welcomed by those familiar sights and scents. All a little more run down, but still the same. We'd only been gone 5 years, but it looked like the lack of real train travel led to neglecting some of the upkeep and housekeeping. Or maybe being away just made my memory of the station look cleaner and more modern than it actually was. It's hard to tell how well your mind plays tricks on you. Look at who I found out in the wild. Uncle Umbali sounded the start of the season as everyone in the family let out a cheer. The loud chorus of welcomes and greetings sang out in a deafening roar, all our family impatiently waiting just past the turnstiles. Sweffin? My little sister Nolly is always the first voice. Did you get our card? The one with that serious photo? Be nice, Sweffin. We worked hard to get it right. As the youngest in the family, Nolly worked extra hard to do the acceptable and to be accepted. Her husband, Tamir, and their daughter, my niece, Rhodiola, was the first of the next generation in our family. She bore an incredible responsibility that was silently thrust upon her with the expectations of lineage and continued traditions. I like to believe it's different these days, though. That's how these things change. Coming home means something different every time. With such a long break since the last time we made it to Besnowed, it was a big event. Welcoming us all at the station, the whole family wearing smiles as they put off holiday preparations. There was a time when my coming home was much less special, however. Shortly after I first moved to Verenum for my studies, everyone got used to the convenience of the train and the flexibility of a school schedule. It reached the point where I was expected to show up nearly every weekend and minor holiday. My address may have officially been in the city, but I still lived more in Besnowed than behind the high stone walls of Verenum. Even if something came up during exams or an important project was due, I'd be sure to hear a comment or three about how I should have made more an effort to show up. After graduating, everything changed. Life was busier and my survival in the city demanded more commitment. Between growing into a new home with Lumi and working on my own career, I couldn't find the time or money for train tickets back home. And so, for a few good years, my homecoming was an event for the village. When my grandparents were still alive, they'd get all the cousins, aunts, and uncles to show up at the station. With their passing and our aging, everything calmed into a quieter arrival. The only reason there was a crowd on this day was the 5-year delay since our last visit. I imagine the only reason Uncle Umbali was there was because of the new job. And even that was somewhat strange. My uncle shared some strong political views. The common opinion of undeserved taxes being sent too often to Verenum. Seeing him support that very system was a bit strange, but pragmatics have a way of winning out in the end. I could have also been overestimating his passion. Everyone has looser lips and a louder bark at the big family dinners. My memories of him and my dad arguing for hours, happening when the glasses are newly full and the plates are already empty. Little Ren is so big, Lumi's mother, Lotu cried out from just past the turnstiles. She quickly reached out, guiding the rest of the family to help with our luggage as we stumbled past the mechanism and into the main hall. Have you already eaten? Are you hungry? We brought some of Lumi's favorite snacks. Lotu was always willing to help the family in any way she could. Both of Lumi's parents were like that. Tamu, her dad, was a strong man with a scarred body from the years of hard labor. He moved from simple cargo loading and unloading at the station to owning a market tent for the family to buying into a larger store in one of the buildings surrounding the central square. Both of them would move the world for Lumi and her sister Lin. We ate on the train, but I'm a little hungry, Ren answered in an unfortunately honest reply. Nothing short of stark denial would satisfy Lotu and her generosity. He must have forgotten how strongly and immediately his grandmother reacts to any needs of the family. Take this, then. Lotu brought out a small box and handed it over to Ren. They were roasted chestnuts that were likely only recently shipped in. They weren't local goods, but the flavors were homemade. Thank you so much, Grandma Joa. Make sure you share them with Zori, too. We'll get some more from the bakery before we leave the station. They must have just delivered some. Chestnuts represented more to his grandmother Lotu than I think Ren could understand. Not only were they one of Lumi's favorite holiday snacks, they were seen as a rare delicacy when Lotu herself was young. Over the span of a couple generations, they went from a symbolic offering to a special dessert to a simple snack. Mom! Lumi pushed past Ren and embraced her mother with the full emotion of being separated for 5 years. They were always close, and as such, the strict measures of the quarantine and travel bans were especially tough on Lumi and Lotu. All that was eased as they felt the touch of one another again, the feeling of home shared through the whole family. Lumi, you're as beautiful as ever. Lotu rubbed Lumi's back as tears rolled down her eyes. Neither mother nor daughter could hold back the raw emotion in their body, reunited after the long journey and welcomed with her favorite snack. The little things that make life worth living and reminders of how those who are closest love us without exception. Lumi's father, Tamu, was quick to offer his own aid. He grabbed our luggage from our hands and helped move the heavy bags to the side as we prepared to greet the rest of the family. He then gave me a stern, approving nod before joining his wife and daughter for another warm hug. Dad! Ren, give Grandpa Joa some chestnuts too. Lumi always knew how to keep everyone together, especially her family. And get Ani Lin over here too. Okay, Mom. Ren was familiar with how these arrivals could go, but he still was obviously a bit overwhelmed. The attention and pressure was on as he was meant to adapt to the way things were in Besnowed, while also helping his sister Zori understand as well. Why send Ren when I'm already here? Lumi's sister Lin shared a dry sense of humor with Ren. They laughed at Lumi's expense before sharing a few bites of chestnuts and another warm hug. Through it all, Zori was passed around as the newest member of the family. These were all people she met in videos and letters, but had no memories of ever meeting in person. Daddy? Zori looked up to me with wide eyes and a bit of a frown on her face. She wasn't sure how to behave and wanted to fit in, but obviously felt like these people were still somewhat strangers, and they were to some degree, at least to her. She would surely get over that initial uncomfortable air, but I knew it was time to become Dad again. I picked her up and held her tight as Lumi's family took turns sharing their love. Me being there to hold her helped calm her nerves as the members of the family only continued their greetings. My own mother soon joining the chorus, rushing up to hug her son and granddaughter. I've missed you so much. And Zori, she's so sweet. I can't believe I'm finally getting to see her. I've missed you too, Mom. We smiled for everything we remembered together. How she raised me to be the type of man Lumi would fall in love with. How my kids were proud to call me Dad. How she would always love me and I always love her. And then we hugged deeply, squishing Zori a bit as she let out a little yelp between our bodies. Zori, how is my lovely little cupcake doing? Have you missed us all the way in the city? Mom backed off and took Zori from my arms. She was still treating Zori like the toddler she met over 5 years ago. Grandma Kumi, can you really visit the penguins in Besnowed? Zori asked the question, still on her mind, but it could not have been more perfect. Mom loves penguins and sees them as a special animal. They remind her of her family, and having my daughter bring up the subject unprovoked meant they now shared some kind of unique connection. Does little Zori love penguins just like Grandma Kumi does? Mom's face lit up as she held Zori high into the air, her smile drawing in the full glory of St. Vincent's flame, and Zori could only provide a confused expression in return. Yes? Well, Ren told me you can live with the penguins, and I've never lived with penguins, so I think we should do that. Zori struggled to organize her thoughts amid the onslaught of affection. She knows her brother well, and although she may have appeared to simply naively believe everything he said, she definitely held some doubt to his claims. Having everything not only be confirmed as true, but so enthusiastically, caught her somewhat off guard. We can't live with them, but if we have the time, maybe we can take a trip to see the sanctuary. Right, Aldor? Mom looked at Dad, and the plans were already being made to conflict with the existing Frithik-Nyun schedule. I'm sure all Dad wanted at that moment was to make it through the feast and gift-giving before thinking about a big family trip anywhere but to St. Vincent's Church. I'll look into it, Coram. Dad tried his best to hide his sigh, but it was clear to anyone with half a brain and eyes. He was always like that, though. Hard to get to do anything, but would inevitably be the one who talked about it for the longest after it happened. Psst. Zori, I have something for you. Mom let Zori down and whispered in her ear as she hid her hands behind her back. Some kind of early Frithik-Nyun gift, to be sure. And we all had a good idea of what it would be. A gift? A penguin just for you. Mom pulled out a stuffed toy penguin she must have found at one of the market tents in the central plaza. It was locally made, and the quality was so different than anything Zori knew from Verenum. The colors and the fabric were also a bit off from what she was used to, but that mattered little to the excitement of a small child receiving the gift of a new toy. Thank you, Grandma Kumi. I told Daddy I like penguins, so this is perfect. Mom was doubly happy to hear how much her granddaughter loved that favorite animal of hers. Her heart melted as she lamented the 5 years away. All the growing Zori did without seeing her loving grandma. I saw it and thought of you, Zori, and don't let anyone know, but there may be more for your brother, your mommy, and even your grumpy daddy. Mom loudly whispered the last bit, as was her style of humor. She always got us similar gifts, so it was hardly a surprise. There were groans to be shared, but we all appreciated how much she thought of us, even if it was often expressed in a silly sentiment like stuffed penguin toys. What was important was what we meant to each other. Zori was then passed around like a hot potato from grandmother to grandfather, aunt to uncle, cousin to cousin. She was the star of the hour, as everyone who knew her so well was introduced to her world. Auntie Lumi? After meeting the last of the cousins, Zori's head was spinning, trying to remember all the names of relatives that knew hers. She tried her best to remember the halves of the familiar, but by the time it got down to cousins, she truly struggled to recognize the relation. So when Frezi, our niece, Lumi's sister's daughter, brought her back over to us, she wasn't sure whose hand she was holding. She put blind trust in someone who, to her, was a stranger. She simply knew she could be confident in her comfort-trusting family. So when Frezi, Zori's cousin and Lin's daughter, brought Zori to Lumi, her face was filled with confusion as she tried to juggle all the names in her head. On top of that, Lumi was lost in conversation with Lin, Zori's aunt and Lumi's sister, and Lotu, Zori's grandmother. Frezi, how is my niece doing? Lumi answered with a smile as she reached for Zori's hand, her serious expression going over the faces of the 3 generations standing in a circle. I'm doing all right. I'll probably be taking up more responsibilities at the family store soon. That's wonderful. Lumi's parents owned a local store in one of the buildings just off the central square, and her sister Lin had taken up the family trade after we decided to stay in Verenum. The shop itself had gone through many iterations, from a simple restaurant to an entertainment center to now being a place for household commodities. It was quite successful locally, and the Joie family name was well known in Besnowed, from all the people who passed through their store. But what about the food? Frezi knew how to ask the most important questions, and so as the conversation relaxed and the formalities passed, all 3 generations were soon busy discussing the details of snacks and other tasty treats from the city. You wouldn't believe all the amazing foreign chocolates you can get in Verenum. Lumi started half bragging, half explaining as she motioned to Ren, who then pulled out a box of chocolates we prepared before leaving. You can get any chocolate whenever you want. Lynn wore a surprised face that only grew into a grander astonishment as Ren handed Lumi the box. They were imported goods from across the street, and the packaging wore letters in a foreign script. Everything signaled exquisite taste that was impossible to find in Besnowed. Not just any chocolate, good chocolate. They could go on for hours about the different types of food that were hard, if not impossible, to find in Besnowed. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the heavier pieces of luggage was filled with nothing but snacks. If I ever dared to bring it up, the response would likely be a snide remark about why I would even think to ask such a question. Lochu, let's make sure they have enough to eat, and I'm sure they're hungry after the trip. Lumi's father Tamu waved his side of the family toward the bakery in the train station. He would look to buy some of the latest breads and freshest meats. He always cared so deeply about making sure we felt not only welcomed as guests, but as family. I'm going with them, Sweffen. Watch the kids and we'll meet up with you later. Lumi pointed Zori over to me as she joined arms with her sister and her niece. She playfully pulled her mother Lochu toward the bakery and could easily end up spending the rest of the day sampling new dishes and picking out new snacks. Okay. Ren and Rhodiola were already catching up on the small-town gossip. It'd been 5 years since they last met. They were around the same age, close to that of Frezzy as well, and that meant they were automatically friends within the family. Zori was the younger cousin and left out in some ways, not old enough to share their same teenage dramas and worries about entering a more adult life. She found more than enough attention from Mom, though, alternating between holding her up and doting her with new gifts as we bundled up for a trek through town. Before that ceremonious exit could happen, my oldest sister Mikodi and her new shade of graying hair took center stage. She was ever the most organized, and there was always a plan in her head that we were all expected to follow. She motioned to Uncle and Bali, leading the way to pick up our bags. Do they have enough coats for the cold this year, or do we need to get them a few furs before heading outside? Their city fabrics are supposed to be tested for all our temperatures. They wouldn't lie over there, would they? I'm serious, Uncle and Bali. Aye, I'm sure they'll be fine. But I can spare a few furs if you're worried our amenities aren't to their expensive standards. That's not what I meant, but thank you. You're always welcome. The closest relatives always know how to lay on the thickest sarcastic tension. The response may have been less than polite, but at least Mikodi was satisfied, and the march to my parents' house, my old home, could finally begin. We'll have to stop by the cafeteria sometime while you're here. I really want you to try the new batch of mulled wine. Ridney works there now, and I promise you, this year's recipe is extra special. He's been telling me how excited he is to see if it passes your sophisticated city taste test. Ridney works at the cafeteria now? I asked an obvious question. Mikodi met her husband, Ridney Pori, at the cafeteria nearly half a lifetime ago. She used to tell the story to anyone and everyone who'd listen, but I guess time's eroded the sweetness of the tale to the ears who heard it one too many times. Yes? Is that funny? Well... Oh, you actually remember that story? How could I forget? Hey, Poopy Egg! My second sister Brian broke up the conversation and was quick to highlight our ever-cheerful relationship. Don't let your sisters do all the work and help us carry some of the bags. Right, sorry. Oh, stop it, Brian. He's tired from the trip already. There's no need to be so short with him. My youngest sister Nolly moved to help with my bag as the old wooden doors opened up to reveal the quiet snow-covered central plaza. And it was cold. Biting cold. The warmth of the station created a wall against the impressive armies of the frozen front. A losing battle in the long run. I always worried Ren and Zori wouldn't be ready to take in the low temperatures of Besnowed. They weren't that far from our own winters, but it always felt more extreme in the village. Fortunately, Ren was distracted, trying to learn the new inside jokes from his cousin Rhodiola, Nolly's daughter and my niece, and Zori was properly squished between Mom and Dad. And I know I'm repeating myself, but it's worth saying again. Besnowed is, was, and will always be significantly colder than Verenum.